My name is Margaret Lawson. I'm 68 years old, and not long ago, the very sons I raised tried to pack my entire life into a tiny apartment at a senior home. They called it a safe place, complete with Tuesday night bingo and fixed meal schedules, but I knew it for what it really was, a carefully crafted trap to get their hands on the $2 million my husband and I spent a lifetime building. I'll never forget the evening my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're going to love it there. Who doesn't love bingo?" In that moment, a wave of fury rose in me, along with one cold, unshakable thought: they had no idea who their mother really was. They assumed I'd quietly sign the papers, sell my home, and step willingly into the gilded cage they'd prepared. They were wrong, and I was going to show them just how wrong. If you've ever been underestimated by family, if you've ever had to play weak just so they'd reveal their true intentions, you'll understand my story. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to tell you how this helpless widow turned their backstab into a counterstrike that left the entire family speechless. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every second of it. 3 days before that disastrous family dinner, I was sitting alone at my kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the polished oak surface, illuminating the stack of envelopes I had been avoiding. Most of them were the usual bills and bank statements, but there was one cream-colored, thick, with my eldest son's handwriting. That alone was unusual. Daniel never wrote letters. The message inside was short, polite, and dripping with formality. "Please join us for dinner this Saturday. We have something important to discuss." No hint of what the important matter might be. No casual "hope you're doing well, Mom." Just the kind of carefully composed note you might send to a business contact you're trying to impress or manipulate. I set the card down beside the financial statements I'd been reviewing. My late husband, Robert, and I had spent over 40 years building our savings and investments. We'd been careful, deliberate, and never reckless. The total came to just over $2 million now. Enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough, apparently, to make my sons impatient. The house felt too quiet without Robert. He'd been gone nearly a year, but I still caught myself turning to tell him things, only to be met with silence. 42 years together fills a home with so much life. You almost forget it can ever be empty. Now, every creak of the wooden floors, every faint hum from the refrigerator seemed to echo back at me, reminding me just how alone I was. I'd raised Daniel and my younger son, Michael, to be independent, driven men. Daniel was a successful real estate developer in Chicago. Michael had built a career in wealth management, handling investments for high-profile clients. They both married well-educated women from affluent families and settled into the kind of polished suburban lives Robert and I had worked so hard to make possible. I used to think I'd done well, but over the past year, something had shifted. Behind their smiles, I began noticing calculation. Their visits became less about seeing me and more about subtle questions. How much was the house worth? Did I really need all that space? Wasn't it exhausting to manage alone? That Saturday arrived with a sharp October breeze that rattled the wind chimes on my porch. I dressed with intention: dark green silk blouse, cream slacks, and the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted them to see the woman Robert loved, not the helpless widow they seemed to believe I had become. Daniel's home was everything you'd expect from a man who built houses for a living. Sleek lines, expensive stonework, the kind of landscaping that made you wonder how much the gardener was paid. His wife, Vanessa, greeted me with a smile so polished it could have been etched in glass. She leaned in for an air kiss, her perfume sharp and expensive. Inside, Michael and his wife, Claire, were seated in the living room, sipping wine. Michael gave me a quick hug, his attention already drifting to his phone. Claire's smile was the kind that never quite touched her eyes. We made small talk: Vanessa's charity work, Claire's new Pilates instructor, the grandchildren's accomplishments at their private schools. The conversation was light, polite, and as thin as tissue paper. I nodded, smiled, and kept my own thoughts locked away. Years of social training had taught me how to listen without revealing what I was thinking. Dinner was set in their formal dining room, complete with crystal glasses and china that had probably been selected by an interior designer. We made it through the first 2 courses without incident. But when dessert arrived, a tiramisu, Vanessa insisted she made herself, but which I recognized from a well-known local bakery. Daniel set down his coffee cup with a deliberate clink. "Mom," he began, his voice full of practiced concern. "We've been talking about your living situation." I felt my chest tighten, but my face remained calm. "Oh." Michael leaned forward, his tone matching his brother's. "We just worry about you rattling around in that big house alone. The upkeep, the maintenance, it must be exhausting." Claire chimed in. "It's not safe either. Big houses attract problems, and we found the perfect solution." Vanessa reached for a glossy brochure, as if it were a gift she'd been dying to present. "Sunset Haven. It's beautiful, safe. They have a fitness center, a little library, game nights. You'll love it there. They even have bingo on Tuesdays." The photo on the cover showed a smiling older couple playing cards. Inside were pictures of neatly trimmed gardens, cheerful dining halls, and a long list of activities. I flipped to the back page, $4,900 a month for a 1-bedroom. Conveniently, that was almost exactly what my house could rent for in today's market. "It just makes sense," Michael added, the gleam in his eyes betraying his so-called concern. "You'd have company, medical care on site, no more yard work, and the equity from selling the house could be invested wisely. I could make sure it lasts." They all watched me, expecting gratitude or at least mild resistance they could overcome with their well-rehearsed arguments. Instead, I smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile they were used to. It was the kind I used when negotiating with contractors who thought they could take advantage of me. "How thoughtful of you all to plan my future," I said softly. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Daniel tried again. "We just want what's best for you, Mom." I nodded slowly, as if I were considering his words, but inside a cold, sharp clarity was crystallizing. Robert had trusted them to look out for me. He'd never imagined they might see me as a problem to be managed, or as a financial opportunity. "When would this move happen?" I asked. Vanessa's smile brightened. "Sooner rather than later. There's a waiting list, but there's an opening next month. We've already talked to a realtor." And there it was, their timeline, neatly prepared, as though my consent was just a formality. I glanced at each of them, seeing not my children and their spouses, but a team of strategists circling a prize. They thought grief had made me weak. They thought silence meant surrender. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "I'll need some time to think," I said finally. "Of course," Daniel replied quickly, relief in his voice. "But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't last forever." I left their house that night, with my head high and my mind already working. They wanted to move me into a senior facility while they stripped my life for parts. They'd just made their first mistake assuming I didn't have a plan of my own. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew one thing for certain: if they wanted a game, I was going to play it, and I was going to win. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Robert's old leather chair in the study, the one that still carried a faint trace of his aftershave, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Stacks of bank statements, property deeds, and investment records covered the desk like a battlefield map. If my sons wanted to make this a strategic game, I would arm myself with every possible advantage. Robert had been meticulous with our finances, a trait I'd always admired. I'd helped manage our accounts, pay our bills, track our investments, and negotiate property deals. I wasn't just the housewife they remembered from their childhood. I was the reason our wealth had grown as steadily as it did. That night, I took a full inventory between the house, the rental property in Arizona, the investment accounts, and the insurance payout. The total was over $2 million, enough to live comfortably anywhere in the world, enough to make Daniel and Michael impatient. At 8:30 the next morning, my phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Morning, Mom," he said, his tone all honey and sunshine. "Just wanted to check in after last night. I hope we didn't overwhelm you." "Not at all," I replied evenly. "I've been thinking about everything you said." "That's great. What are your thoughts?" He tried to sound casual, but I could hear the eagerness under his words. "I think you might be right about the house being a lot for me to handle," I said. "But before making any decisions, I'd like to see Sunset Haven myself." There was a pause, just long enough for me to imagine his surprise. "Of course, Vanessa can go with you." "I'd rather go alone first," I cut in, my tone light but firm. "I want to get my own impressions." Another pause. "Sure, I'll have Vanessa send you the contact information." After we hung up, I sat quietly in the morning light streaming through the blinds. My sons thought they were guiding me toward their goal, but really, I was steering us all toward mine. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Michael, his smile tight, his eyes scanning the house as if he were appraising it. I was in the neighborhood, he said, though his office was a half-hour away. "How thoughtful." "Come in," I replied. In the kitchen, I made coffee while he settled at the breakfast table, bouncing his leg with restless energy. "So," he began, "Daniel said you might be open to the senior community idea." "I'm exploring options," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Smart. You'd free up so much equity from the house sale. You could travel, maybe take art classes like you used to talk about. And of course, I could help manage the proceeds." There it was, the real reason for his drop-in visit. "You'd want to manage my investments." "Only if you wanted me to," he said quickly. "But I could get you better returns than whatever Dad's conservative approach was doing." I smiled faintly. Robert's conservative approach had built our fortune while surviving multiple market downturns. Michael's tone made it sound like Robert had been a fool for not chasing high-risk gains. "What kind of returns?" I asked, letting him take the bait. 50 to 20% annually, he said proudly. "Some emerging markets, a little cryptocurrency." I nearly laughed. Robert would have called it gambling, but instead, I nodded as though considering it. "Interesting." He leaned forward. "You've got to think about your stage of life, Mom. You want your money working for you while you can still enjoy it." While I was still alive, he meant while there was still time to cash in before my funeral. "I'll think about it," I said finally. The moment he left, I picked up the phone and called Adam Wright, our family attorney and Robert's closest friend. "Margaret," Adam greeted me warmly. "How are you holding up?" "Better than you might think," I said, "but I need some legal advice hypothetically. If someone wanted to keep control of their assets while preventing others from pressuring them, what could they do?" There was a pause. Adam was too smart not to read between the lines. "Are we talking about protecting against creditors or family?" "Family." "I see," he said. "Well, there are options. Irrevocable trusts, offshore accounts, restructuring assets, so they're not easily accessible. It depends on how far you want to go." "What if I wanted to make sure no one could touch my assets without my permission, ever?" "That's very doable," Adam replied. "I've helped quite a few widows in similar situations. We can keep you in full control while making it legally impossible for anyone else to interfere." We arranged to meet later that week. The next day, I toured Sunset Haven. The place was spotless, well-staffed, and soulless. The apartment they showed me was small, no room for Robert's books or the piano I'd played for 50 years. The activities director proudly showed me the craft room, the card tables, the communal TV area where 3 residents were already asleep. It's efficient living for the next chapter of life, she chirped. Efficient, that was their word for it. To me, it looked like a holding pen for people waiting to die. That evening, Daniel called. So, what did you think? Educational, I said. And I think I understand now exactly what you and Michael have in mind. We just want you to be safe and happy, Mom, he insisted. Do you, or do you want me to be managed and controlled? Silence. I hung up before he could answer. For the first time in months, my pulse quickened, not from stress, but from the thrill of taking back control. Tomorrow, I'd meet Adam. Tomorrow, I'd start building a fortress around my life's work. My sons had no idea their helpless mother was already 3 steps ahead. Adam's office sat on the top floor of a modest 2-story building in the heart of downtown Mesa. No gleaming glass tower, no flashy lobby, just a small reception area with a desk, a coffee machine, and the quiet hum of printers in the back. It was exactly the kind of place Robert had trusted substance over show. When Adam stepped out to greet me, he looked just the same as always, silver hair neatly combed, pressed navy suit, and that steady, analytical gaze that missed nothing. Margaret, he said warmly, shaking my hand. You look resolved. I feel resolved, I told him, following him into his office. He closed the door, sat behind his desk, and folded his hands. Tell me everything. So I did. The invitation, the dinner, the glossy brochure with bingo nights, Michael's investment pitch, Daniel's timeline for selling the house, even Vanessa's too bright smile, and the way Claire avoided meeting my eyes. Adam didn't interrupt, he just made occasional notes on a yellow legal pad, his brow furrowing deeper as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. I've seen this before, more than once. Children who see a surviving parent as an obstacle or worse, as an asset to be managed. Is what they're doing legal? I asked. If they convince you to agree, yes, that's why psychological pressure is their tool of choice. They're banking on your love for them, your desire to avoid conflict, and frankly, your fear of being alone. I took a slow breath. I don't want them to have any control over my assets. Not now. Not ever. Adam slid a folder toward me. Option 1, an irrevocable trust. You remain in control as trustee for the rest of your life. But upon your death, your assets are distributed according to terms you set now. Terms they can't change or challenge. What kind of terms? Anything you want, regular contact, proof of genuine care, respect for your decisions. You could even redirect the inheritance to charity if they fail to meet those conditions. I smiled faintly. I like that. Option 2, he continued, is a revocable trust paired with a strategy to restructure your finances. It makes it pointless for them to pressure you because the money wouldn't be easily accessible anyway. And option 3. Adam's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of mischief in his eyes. The nuclear option. You liquidate everything, move the assets offshore, and disappear. Start fresh somewhere else. Something in my chest tightened, not with fear, but with an odd kind of excitement. Disappear. Portugal, Costa Rica, certain parts of Spain, he said, countries with favorable tax laws, excellent health care, and strong protections for foreign residents. Portugal, in particular, is popular with American retirees. Robert and I honeymooned in Lisbon, I said softly, almost to myself. We always talked about going back. Adam tilted his head. It's not impossible. 6 weeks for visa paperwork, another 2 to set up banking and finalize transfers. You could be living in the Algarve by the end of the summer. The image formed in my mind, whitewashed houses, narrow cobblestone streets, ocean air, a place where no one would see me as someone's mother or someone's problem. I want to explore that option, I said finally. You're sure? Adam, if I stay here, they'll never stop. Every visit, every call will be about my house, my finances, my so-called safety. I won't spend the rest of my life being managed like a child." He gave a small, approving nod. "Then we start now. We'll establish a private trust based in the Bahamas, completely legal, but untouchable by anyone but you. We'll liquidate assets in stages so it doesn't raise red flags. What about the house? That will take the longest to sell, unless," he gave me a sly smile, "unless you want to list it at a price that will make your son's eyes pop and keep them distracted while you move forward." I couldn't help but grin. "Oh, I have a few ideas for that." For the next 2 hours, we worked like generals planning a campaign. Accounts to transfer, items to sell quietly, documents to prepare. Every step calculated to look routine dividend payments, CDs maturing, small withdrawals, so Daniel and Michael wouldn't suspect a thing. As I left Adam's office, the weight I'd been carrying since Robert's funeral felt lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving, I was moving forward. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Vanessa. "Margaret, I hope you don't mind me calling directly," she said in that sugary tone she used when she wanted something. "Daniel mentioned your tour of Sunset Haven went well." "It was informative," I replied. "Oh, wonderful. I'd be happy to go with you next time. Introduce you to some of the residents. They're such lovely people." I pictured the craft room, the communal TV, the dozing residents. That's thoughtful, Vanessa. But I'm still thinking things over. "Of course, just don't wait too long. We wouldn't want you to miss the opportunity." After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Robert had been saving for our 50th anniversary. He'd never get to drink it, but I would. Sitting in his chair, I began a list. Items to sell discreetly: jewelry, Robert's watch collection, the sterling silver service we'd barely used. Items to donate: furniture I wouldn't need, his suits, kitchen appliances too bulky for a small home. Items to take: my grandmother's china, a handful of Robert's books, the photo albums, the letter he'd written me before his surgery. Items to leave behind: everything else, including the illusion that my sons had my best interests at heart. That night, as the desert wind rattled the windows, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just reacting to their schemes anymore. I was building my own. And the best part, they would never see it coming. 2 days later, I was in the middle of boxing up a set of crystal glasses when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, my sister Evelyn stood there, suitcase in hand. She lived in Denver and never made surprise visits. The moment I saw her face, I knew this wasn't a casual drop-in. "Daniel called me," she said, stepping inside before I could answer. "He's worried about you living alone." I led her into the kitchen, my mind already piecing it together. Of course, my sons had recruited reinforcements, someone they thought I'd listen to. "What exactly did he tell you?" I asked, pouring us both coffee. "That you've been struggling since Robert passed," she said carefully. "That you're overwhelmed with the house, confused about your finances, and resisting help. He even suggested you might be having some memory issues." Memory issues. I had to bite back a bitter laugh. It was such a predictable tactic, undermine my competence, so they could justify taking control. "And what do you think?" I asked, meeting her eyes. "You seem fine to me. A little thinner, maybe, but that's normal," she admitted. "Still, it's a big house for one person." I set my cup down. "Evelyn, this isn't about the size of the house. It's about Daniel and Michael wanting to manage my assets while I'm still breathing." She frowned. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth," I said flatly. "When was the last time either of them called you just to check in, without an agenda?" Her silence was answer enough. Evelyn had always been susceptible to Daniel's authority ever since we were kids, but I saw the first flicker of doubt in her expression. "They've been circling me for months," I continued. "Every conversation is about the house, my finances, my future, not my health, Not my happiness, just my assets. Evelyn looked down at her coffee. If that's true, what are you going to do? I'm going to make sure they never get what they want, I said. That afternoon, after Evelyn left, still conflicted but less certain of her role as their messenger, I called Adam. How are we progressing? I asked. Better than expected, he replied. The trust documents are drafted. We've already begun moving some of your dividend income into the offshore account. No red flags so far. And Portugal. Visa application is underway. I've found a property management firm that works with American expatriates. If we stay on schedule, you could be in the Algarve within 6 weeks. Make it happen, I told him. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Michael. Hey, Mom, I heard Aunt Evelyn stopped by. How'd that go? It was enlightening, I said. He hesitated, perhaps sensing the edge in my tone. Look, I know this whole transition is a lot to take in, but Daniel and I just want to make sure you're comfortable. Comfortable, I repeated, like the residents at Sunset Haven. Exactly. You'd be surrounded by people your own age, with activities and support, and no independence, I said quietly. He didn't answer right away. It's not about taking away your independence. It's about making sure you're safe. Safety at the cost of control isn't safety, Michael. It's captivity with nice furniture. The silence stretched, and then he muttered something about having to get to a meeting. I hung up before he could spin it further. The next 3 days became an elaborate performance. I called Vanessa to ask about meal plans at Sunset Haven, letting her think I was warming to the idea. I sent Claire a text about how exhausting the yard work had become. I even asked Michael if he could walk me through some of his high-yield strategies, as though I were a curious novice. All the while, Adam and I worked in secret, small transfers from my accounts, the sale of a few valuable items through a discreet dealer, arrangements for an estate sale company to handle the rest once I was gone. Each step was another brick in the wall between me and my son's ambitions. Then came the first twist I hadn't planned for. I was at the bank, closing out an old CD account, when the branch manager, an old friend of Robert's, leaned across the desk. Margaret, I probably shouldn't say this, but Michael was in here last week asking about your accounts. My stomach tightened. In what context? He implied he had your permission to get an overview of your holdings. I didn't give him anything. Of course, without your authorization. We can't, but it was odd. Odd, but not surprising. Michael's job gave him the confidence to believe he could finesse information out of anyone. Now I knew for sure he was probing for details, probably to confirm how much was at stake. When I got home, I called Adam immediately. We have to move faster, I said. They're sniffing around. Understood, he replied. We'll accelerate the asset transfers. It might draw some attention, but better a little suspicion now than a disaster later. That night, I sat alone in Robert's study, the glow of the desk lamp casting a small pool of light across the legal documents spread before me. This house had been the center of our life together. Now it was a chess piece in a game I refused to lose. I thought about the conversation Robert and I had once, years ago, when we first started investing seriously. He'd said, never put your future in someone else's hands, not the banks, not the markets, and certainly not families. I hadn't understood the last part then. Now I did, with crystal clarity. By the time I turned out the light, the decision was final. I wasn't just going to protect my assets. I was going to remove myself entirely from their reach. And when the time came to tell them, I wouldn't whisper it. I'd make sure they heard every word. By Saturday afternoon, the Arizona sun was pouring through my living room windows, throwing long slashes of light across the carpet. Daniel and Michael arrived together, each carrying a legal pad like they were walking into a board meeting. Vanessa trailed behind them, her smile tight, while Claire hung back, glancing around my house as though she were mentally sorting my belongings into piles. "Mom, you look tired," Vanessa said immediately, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "I'm fine," I replied evenly, motioning for them to sit. "Let's get started. You said you had something to show me." Daniel cleared his throat and flipped open his legal pad. "We've prepared some preliminary numbers on the house sale. I've already spoken to a realtor who specializes in quick-turn properties. We could get it on the market in 2 weeks." Michael tapped his pen. "I've also run the math on your monthly expenses at Sunset Haven. Compared to what you're spending here, you'd save thousands every year. That money could be invested for long-term growth." Claire leaned forward, eyes bright. "We could even use part of the proceeds for a family vacation. The grandkids would love to make memories with you." The audacity of that statement nearly made me laugh. Memories funded by my own eviction. "That's very thorough," I said, flipping through their charts and spreadsheets without really looking at them. "You've obviously put a lot of thought into my future." "That's because we care," Daniel said. "This isn't just about you, it's about what's best for the whole family." "Best for the family," I repeated slowly, "or best for your inheritance." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. "Mom, that's not fair," Michael said after a moment. "We're trying to make sure you're safe and financially secure." I set the papers on the coffee table and leaned back, safe and secure in a place where I have no independence, no say in how I live my days, and no privacy. "You're asking me to trade freedom for supervised bingo nights." "It's not like that," Daniel said quickly. "You'd still be independent." "Independent under someone else's schedule," I cut in. "Independent as long as I follow the rules and let you handle my finances." Vanessa's voice softened, but it had the same steel underneath. "Margaret, we just want to help you. You've been through so much since Robert passed." "I've been through a lot," I agreed. "And one of the hardest parts has been realizing my own children think I'm incapable of running my own life." Daniel shifted in his seat. "That's not what we think." "Then why," I asked, "have you spent the last 8 months trying to convince me to sell my house, move into a facility, and hand over my financial control?" No one answered. I let the silence stretch before speaking again. "I appreciate all your planning, but I already have a plan of my own." Michael frowned. "What plan?" I gave a small smile. "You'll find out soon enough." From that moment, the energy in the room shifted. The rest of the conversation was stilted, their polished arguments breaking apart under my refusal to play along. They left less than an hour later, clearly frustrated that the afternoon hadn't gone as they'd expected. As soon as the front door closed, I picked up my phone and called Adam. "It's time," I told him. "Let's finalize everything." Over the next week, we moved quickly. The irrevocable trust was signed, sealed, and locked beyond anyone's reach but mine. My investment accounts were already restructured and partially transferred offshore. Adam connected me with a real estate contact in Portugal who sent photos of a small whitewashed villa with blue shutters and a terrace overlooking the sea. It was perfect. Meanwhile, I continued my performance. I let Daniel think I was waiting for the realtor to call. I texted Michael about a possible second tour of Sunset Haven. I even asked Vanessa to send me more details about their meal options, making her think she'd won me over. But the truth was, every day brought me closer to the moment they'd realize just how far ahead I'd been playing this game. Then, 3 days before I was scheduled to sign the final Portuguese property documents, Vanessa called again. "Margaret, we've been talking," she said, her tone brisk. "We think it would be good to set a firm date for your move. That way we can plan everything packs, selling the house, getting you settled." "I appreciate your enthusiasm," I said, "but I haven't made a decision yet." "Margaret," she began, but I cut her off. "No, Vanessa, not today." She went quiet, and for a moment, I could almost hear the grinding of her teeth. When I hung up, I realized my heart wasn't pounding the way it used to after these conversations. I wasn't rattled anymore. I was in control, and that control was about to become permanent. The final meeting with Adam was the next day. We went over every detail: the trust clauses, the offshore accounts, the legal protections in Portugal, even the arrangements for my estate sale. By the time I left his office, I knew exactly what I had to say and how I had to say it when the time came to tell my family. And that time was coming fast, because in less than 2 weeks, I'd be boarding a plane, not to a senior living facility in Arizona, but to a life my sons could never have imagined and could never touch. The following Saturday, the air in Phoenix was heavy with the promise of an early summer storm. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains as Daniel's SUV pulled into my driveway, Michael's car close behind. They hadn't said why they wanted to meet, but I didn't need a crystal ball to guess. This was going to be their final push. I opened the door before they could knock. Vanessa and Claire were with them uninvited, but not unexpected. I stepped aside, letting them into the living room where I'd deliberately left Robert's desk neat and my coffee table cleared, as if I'd prepared a stage for them. "Thanks for having us, Mom," Daniel said, taking a seat without waiting for me to offer. Michael followed suit, flipping open his ever-present legal pad. Vanessa leaned forward, her tones syrupy smooth. "Margaret, we've been giving this a lot of thought, and we think we should start the process of getting you into Sunset Haven." I arched an eyebrow. "Start the process?" Michael jumped in. "Yes, we spoke to the director. There's an opening next month, and if you put your house on the market now, you could get a great price. We could coordinate everything so it's seamless." Claire added, "It would be so much easier for you, and the grandkids would love visiting you there. You'd be part of a community." Community, I almost laughed. I'd seen that community: people sleeping in chairs in the common room while the television blared. I folded my hands in my lap. And who would be handling the sale of the house? "I've already contacted a realtor," Daniel said, his tone full of the confidence of a man used to making decisions for other people. "They can do a quick sale. Less hassle for you." "And my belongings?" I asked. Claire smiled, too eagerly. "We'd help you sort through them, decide what to keep, what to donate. I'm sure the kids would love some keepsakes from their grandfather." Keepsakes. The word tasted bitter. My life, my memories, reduced to trinkets for their children's bedrooms. "And my finances?" I asked. Michael didn't hesitate. "I could manage everything. Invest the proceeds from the house. Make sure you have steady income for the rest of your life." I let the silence settle for a beat before I spoke. "So you want me to sell my home, move into supervised housing, give up my autonomy, and let you control my money? Did I miss anything?" Daniel bristled. "Mom, that's not fair. We're offering to take care of you." "Take care of me," I repeated, my voice cool. "Or take control of me?" Vanessa's smile faltered. "We're just trying to make sure you're safe." "Safe," I said softly. "Or contained?" They all stared at me, and in that moment, I knew this was the time. I rose from my chair and crossed to Robert's desk, opening the top drawer. From inside, I pulled out a thick envelope and returned to my seat, placing it deliberately on the coffee table between us. "This," I said, tapping the envelope, "is the legal documentation for the trust I established 3 weeks ago. Every asset I own: my house, my investments, Robert's life insurance has been transferred into it. It is irrevocable. That means you cannot touch it, ever." Michael's jaw tightened. "You can't just—" "Yes, I can," I interrupted, and I did. "This is no longer your business. My assets are mine to use as I see fit, for the rest of my life, and no one, not even my sons, can interfere." Daniel's face darkened. "This is insane. Who talked you into this?" "That lawyer. Adam Wright has been our family attorney for 25 years. He's protecting me from manipulation, not enabling it." Vanessa's voice rose. You're being paranoid. No one is trying to hurt you. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You have spent 8 months undermining my competence, pushing me toward a facility I never asked for, and trying to get access to my finances. That is not love. That is not care. That is control. Claire looked away. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again. I took a deep breath. And since you've made it clear you see me as an obstacle to your inheritance, I've made adjustments to my will. The trust will distribute my estate based on very specific conditions, conditions you have not met. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What conditions? That you treat me with respect, that you maintain regular, meaningful contact not tied to my finances, that you honor my autonomy. The trust's independent executor will decide if those conditions are met. Silence, heavy, suffocating. Finally, Michael spoke. What if we don't? Then my estate goes elsewhere, charities that protect seniors from exploitation, organizations that fight exactly what you've been trying to do to me. Daniel stood abruptly. You're overreacting. This is revenge. I met his gaze. No, Daniel, this is self-preservation. The revenge is just a bonus. Vanessa's lips tightened. So what now? You just stay here and rot in this house until you can't anymore. I smiled slowly. No, as of next Tuesday, I will be gone, not to Sunset Haven, to Portugal. I've bought a villa there, overlooking the ocean. Robert and I walked beside on our honeymoon. You won't know the address, and you won't need it. Shock rippled across their faces. Claire actually gasped. You can't just leave, Michael said, as if the words themselves could stop me. I can, and I am. Them. The storm outside finally broke, rain lashing against the windows as they sat there, stunned. I reached for the envelope, slid it back into my hands, and rose. This meeting is over. Adam has your contact information if you need to contest the trust. But I warn you, irrevocable means irrevocable. I walked to the front door and held it open, one by one. They filed past me, their eyes hard and their mouths tight. No hugs, no goodbyes. When the door closed behind them, I leaned against it for a moment, listening to the sound of the rain and feeling lighter, free. In less than 72 hours, I would be gone, and they would finally understand that the woman they thought was powerless had been holding all the power all along. Tuesday morning dawned clear and sharp, the kind of desert morning Robert used to love. The air was crisp, the sunlight golden, and the mountains stood in the distance like quiet witnesses. I stood in my now nearly empty living room, 2 suitcases and a carry-on beside me. The furniture was tagged for the estate sale, the shelves bare except for a few framed photos I'd chosen to take with me. The taxi was due in 20 minutes. I moved slowly through the house one last time, my fingertips trailing over the banister Robert had polished every spring, the kitchen counters where I'd prepared countless Sunday dinners, the windows we'd once sat by to watch the summer monsoons roll in. Each room held a memory, some sweet, some bittersweet, but none worth trading my freedom for. In the study, Robert's presence was still strong. His books, the worn leather of his chair, the photo of us in Lisbon on our honeymoon. I picked it up, running my thumb over the glass. In the picture, my hair was longer, my smile unguarded, and Robert was laughing at something I'd said. We'd been so certain the future was wide open. You were right, Robert, I murmured. Never put your future in someone else's hands. I slipped the photo into my bag and closed the study door for the last time. The taxi pulled up right on schedule. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, loaded my bags into the trunk without a word. As we drove away, I kept my gaze forward. I'd decided not to look back, not at the street, not at the house, not at the life I was leaving. Some doors had to stay closed for good. At the airport, I moved through security with an ease I hadn't felt in years. My ticket was one way to Lisbon. With a connection in New York, I had a seat by the window, and as the plane lifted off, I felt an almost physical sense of weightlessness, not from the altitude, but from the release of everything that had been pressing down on me for the last year. Somewhere over the Atlantic, as the cabin lights dimmed, I took out a postcard I'd bought at the airport, Phoenix skyline at sunset. I wrote in steady, deliberate script, "The food is better here, even the nights." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Daniel and Michael would know exactly who it was from. When the plane landed in Lisbon, the air was different, softer, touched with salt from the nearby ocean. The taxi from the airport wound through narrow cobblestone streets lined with pastel-colored buildings, each with wrought iron balconies overflowing with flowers. The scent of baking bread and fresh coffee drifted from small cafes. When we reached the villa, I knew immediately I'd made the right choice. Whitewashed walls, blue shutters, and a terrace that opened to a view of the Atlantic that stole my breath. I stepped inside cool tile floors, sunlight spilling through tall windows, and just enough space for the pieces of my old life I'd chosen to keep. That first evening, I stood on the terrace with a glass of Vinho Verde, watching the waves crash against the cliffs below. The sky turned from gold to rose to deep indigo, the lighthouse in the distance, sending out its steady beam. For the first time in a year, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for: peace. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a rhythm: mornings at the open-air market, afternoons exploring winding streets, evenings reading on the terrace. I began picking up Portuguese phrases, chatting with shopkeepers, even making friends: a retired teacher from England, a painter from France, a young couple from Lisbon who ran the bakery on the corner. Occasionally, I'd think about Daniel and Michael, wondering what they said to each other after that stormy meeting. Did they blame me for cutting them out? Did they realize they'd brought this on themselves? Or were they still too busy being angry to notice the part of me that had been quietly fading under their pressure had come back to life? One afternoon, a letter arrived from Adam. Inside was a short note in his careful handwriting. "Everything is in place. The trust is secure. Enjoy your freedom." I smiled as I folded it back into the envelope. Freedom. Such a small word for something so profound. On my 59th day in Portugal, I walked down to the beach below the cliffs. The water was cold but clear, the sand warm under my feet. I waded in until the waves lapped at my calves and tilted my face to the sun. For the first time, I thought about Robert without the ache of loss overshadowing the memory. I could almost hear him laughing beside me, telling me I'd done the right thing. That evening, I hosted a small dinner on the terrace for my new friends. We ate fresh sardines, crusty bread, and olives, drinking wine until the stars came out. I told them about Arizona, about Robert, about the life I'd left behind. But I didn't mention Daniel and Michael, not because I was hiding the truth, but because they no longer had any claim on my story. When the last guest left, I stood alone under the night sky, the sound of the ocean in my ears. I realized then that the revenge hadn't been moving away or locking my assets beyond their reach. The real revenge was this: living a life that was entirely mine, on my own terms, without fear, without compromise. I raised my glass toward the horizon, to freedom,